Okay, can you hear me, Tom?
Yeah, okay. Has your site on your site is basically films that should not be forgotten, right?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, people complain that I tend to only review older films. There have been some recent ones that I've done. Like I loved Hereditary. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen your video of it.
No, but the actual movie itself, yeah. I mean, that was a recent one that I loved. But I think that was the first horror movie I'd seen in something like 15, 20 years that I thought was a classic. That had recently come out. Okay, so
How's the new one?
Midsummer. Well, I was disappointed in it personally. I actually looked up some interviews with Ari Aster, the director, because I think he's a major new talent. And I read that he actually agreed to direct Midsummer before Hereditary was actually released. So he didn't know that Hereditary was going to be a big hit. And there was a Swedish company that funded him to do Midsummer. It was their movie idea. And I don't think it was a very personal film for him. I think he's tried to attach some personal stuff of his own, but the film just didn't gel for me. It's way too long as well. It's like 3 hours long.
I'm
It's
hearing the same thing here, and I've also been hearing that it's like Basket Case is like the film from.
oh sorry, The Wicker Man. That was the
Yes,
film. Yeah,
yes, that it's a riff on Wicker Man.
yeah. Basket Case was the one about a monster in a basket that was killing people, and that was a funny film as well.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
anyway, but I mean, I'm sort of curious about Midsummer because he did just long takes. Is that what he did?
Yeah, I think there's potentially a good film there. I thought that maybe 20 minutes, half an hour could have easily been cut out of the film. It repeats itself a lot as well, which I find is a major problem with modern movies. I mean, like your script for Psycho 2, one of the things I love about that script is how each scene is straight to the point, no messing around. And, there's no filler material in the script at all that I can see. But with modern movies, I find writers aren't condensing the scenes well enough.
Okay, go look at Sorry Wrong Number, the late 40s, and that's the classic example of a charging, no repetition, every scene short and to the point,
Yeah.
and just a charging narrative. It was a huge success as a radio play. I mean, like one of the three top, I think, or something like that. Sorry, Wrong Number. And it's been remade as a movie, I think, two or three times. God only knows how many times it's been ripped off.
Okay.
That's the classic example of every scene has to advance the story.
Yes.
No, it's brilliant, actually. So a woman wrote it, and I forget her name.
Is that a principle in script writing that you've always adhered to, where you condense the story, down to its raw points?
Well, I tried. I haven't, and then I got sloppy later on in my career because I started doing other people's work. But that was, yes, that was certainly through Child's Play. That was what I did. And after that, I started to write less and started doing more adaptations and rewrites and polishes.
Yeah.
But through Child's Play, yes. And what I did in order to stop people trying to take credit away from me, this is the Writers Guild now,
Mm-hmm.
I would write extremely solid narratives where, as I said, every scene had to advance the story, and that meant that the structure was probably the most important thing about the movie, or certainly the script,
Yeah.
and that they couldn't have somebody come in to polish me who would then go for credit.
Ah, that's interesting. Okay.
What goes on among writers, somebody will come in and do a light dialogue polish and then claim that they, deserve credit for the script.
Yeah.
So I learned that how I structured the story protected me against that, which is why I had so many movies where I had the sole credit.
Well, that's an interesting thing there. Is I've read that Hitchcock did the same regarding how he shot his films, where he would only shoot what was sort of needed. He had things so specifically planned out that the studios couldn't really re-edit his films to turn them into something else.
That certainly is true. There's the famous story about The Lodger, where they thought it was the producers, the studio thought it was a disaster, and I believe said it, put it on the shelf and didn't release it for 2 or 3 years and almost destroyed him emotionally. You can believe that because The Lodger was a breakthrough film in terms of film technique.
Is that an old black and white one of his, is it?
Yes, The Lodger? Oh,
yeah, I've
yes.
not seen that one.
It's been remade, I don't know how many times, 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And the other one who was famous for that was John Ford. And probably the 2 greatest directors in the English language were John Ford and Hitchcock. At least there are a lot of people who would argue that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've heard a hell of a lot of praise for The Searchers, which I think is a great film as well. I love The Searchers. Yeah.
Searchers is a great film.
Yeah, yes. I think Martin Scorsese has talked about that as being one of his top 5 of all time.
Well, for that, what people don't do is they don't look at films or novels in the moment at which they're created, what society was like at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember exactly the year of The Searchers, what, 54, 5, 6?
I really don't know. I couldn't even pin it down by decade.
sometime in the mid 1950s. In other words, it was a period when it was post World War II, and society was at least here in America was in the backwash of World War II, and it was a very stable conformist society. And then you look at something like The Searchers, which now, as we look back on it, you could say is about racism.
Yeah.
But nobody even knew what the term racism meant in 1956 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so that becomes even more stunning. It's the same way that Psycho was. I don't know what I was, 11, 12, 13 when I saw Psycho.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you what an amazing film that was, and I'd never seen anything like it. And it was the first time I became aware of cutting, of montage.
Yeah.
Before that, I don't really remember being aware of film as being a bunch of pieces that were put together to make a film, you know? And at that moment in time, especially coming out of AIP and Hammer, you know, it was extremely, film was very by rote. You know, they'd have a wide establishing shot, they'd go into a closer 2 or 3, and maybe you get some over the shoulders, and very, very infrequently you might get an insert. So Psycho was like just a huge advancement in terms of film technique. But then so was The Lodger. Lodger was I think it was at that moment when they were transitioning from silent to sound. So that also was like an inventing or furthering the advancement of film technique. So Hitchcock did that at least twice. You know, I mean,
yeah.
Really. I mean, Hitchcock, you know, Psycho invented the slasher.
It did, yeah. It's
and
it's still one of the best, arguably, possibly even the best slasher film ever.
Well, it invented the fucking genre.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, but it's also one of the best films ever.
Just, you mentioned The Lodger. I've always been wondering, there was a clip I saw of an old black and white Hitchcock film once, and I've never found out which one it was. He'd shot a scene where a character is walking around upstairs, and one character looks up.
You're looking up through the glass on the floor.
Is that the same film?
That's The Lodger.
Oh, I've got to see that. Because I remember seeing that shot and being stunned and thinking, how the hell did they pull that off? You know, what kind of glass did they use there? How strong was it, you know?
He put glass down that they could walk on, and then shot up through the glass of people walking on top of it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen that done anywhere else.
Well, that's what Hitchcock could do. If you go back, when Richard Franklin got Psycho 2, and then he came to me to write it, we figured it was a career ender.
Yeah.
It would be the end of us ever working, you know? And I'd only had one produced film before that called The Beast Within. And I'd been working for years trying to break in. And
So did you know Richard Franklin already?
no, I didn't. What happened was his lawyer was also my lawyer, and my lawyer gave him a couple of my spec scripts,
Right.
and he fell in love with one of them.
Uh-huh.
And so I went in and we met at Universal, and I don't know, we were both so excited about the property because Psycho had been a watershed moment in my perception of film, as I just said.
And Richard Franklin, he loved Psycho as well. He talked about seeing it around about the same age that you saw it.
Well, for him, yeah, he was the one that he thought he's one of the ones who thought that Hitchcock and John Ford were the two greatest, directors in the world. Richard was almost an academic. He came out of USC here, University of Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
That was sort of the beginning of film school. That was with the class, or within a couple of years of each other, the class that George Lucas and, a guy who did Grease was in his class.
Yeah.
I think Richard produced the film that the guy did about the kids on some island that was so sexy at the time.
Was that the Blue Lagoon, the film?
That's Blue Lagoon.
Yeah, I remember. I haven't seen that since I was a kid.
I think he co-produced it or produced it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They were all from USC, graduating at that point, and they were within a few years of each other. Andrew London, who edited Psycho 2, was at USC with Richard, which is where they met, and it was a time of great ferment among that 70s generation that came out of film school, and USC at that moment in time was the leading film school. And then, of course, after that, every goddamn college had a film department. I went to Northwestern University back in the early '60s, and there were no film schools anywhere. So I went to the theater school at Northwestern University outside of Chicago because it was the closest I could get to film. So that's why I say that in order to evaluate older films, if you can get any idea of the historical
The context
in which it comes from,
Yeah.
you can understand what's going on, and also why some of them were such brilliant steps forward in terms of creating the genre. Halloween is the commercialization of Psycho, for Christ's sake, for kids.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Not to take anything away from John Carpenter, but it is.
Yeah.
I mean, if no Psycho, no Halloween.
Absolutely.
Because believe me, Carpenter wasn't going to create a genre like Psycho did.
Well, there's a funny thing about where you talk about appreciating the historical context. I watched about 3 episodes of the Bates Motel TV series, which is more recent.
Yes.
And I got totally put off it because in the original Psycho film and in Psycho 2 and so on, there was no internet, there was no mobile phones, anything like that. And in the Bates Motel TV series, Norman Bates, who's supposed to be isolated from the world, pulls out a mobile phone and starts texting people. And I was like, no, this guy's supposed to be separate from the world. That doesn't work. So I switched it off and I didn't watch the rest of the series.
Well, that's just silly. So,
Yeah.
But Psycho 2 is the film that's responsible for creating the whole Psycho series. When we did Psycho 2, it was a cable movie. And this is just at the beginning of cable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the end credits, you'll see that one of the producers is called Oak Communications.
Right.
which was one of the first cable companies in San Diego, California. And okay, not only did Richard and I think it was a career ender, having the temerity to even try to do a sequel to it, but we also thought that nobody is going to pay any attention if it's just a cable movie, one of the first cable movies, but a cable movie, which would have been like a TV movie in those days.
Was it not planned to have a cinema release? Was it only intended for cable?
Only intended for cable because
Wow.
Universal had no sense of what the excitement and the want to see would be about doing a sequel to Psycho.
Wow.
They thought it was just, it was a quick sale for them. For as a TV movie, basically.
Do you think that gave you guys creative freedom because not so much was riding on it?
Our careers depended on it,
Mm.
Rob. I don't know if I've ever worked as hard or as diligently on any other script that I've written as I did on Psycho 2.
Yeah.
In order for us to get to a movie, to make a movie, Richard and I figured that we had to write a part that was good enough to bring Anthony Perkins back as Norman. We knew that if we didn't have Tony, that we would end up being a forgotten, terrible, low-budget cable movie.
Was Christopher Walken considered for taking on the Norman Bates role? I read that somewhere.
But not that I ever knew.
Yeah.
What I knew was that it makes sense, was the right casting, but that wasn't the problem as I saw it. What I thought was I had to write a script where the acting role was strong enough that it would bring Tony Perkins back and be willing and want to do it. So I had to write something that was a real acting challenge, that really had a character and a character arc for an actor, for a real actor, because Tony was a real actor.
Oh, he's great, yeah.
And I think one of the things that had made Psycho so resonant was Norman was the serial killer you felt sorry for.
Yeah.
Because the way it's set up, it was the mother's fault. The mother had driven him to it. And so you felt a sympathy because you had some insight into his insanity, and Tony did him as the quintessential mama's boy. So anyway, it was how to write a part that was strong enough to bring Tony back. And what happened was the script really worked. I mean, you'd have to be crazy if you were an actor not to want to play Norman in that script.
Yeah, it's a dream role. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a dream role, and so Tony said yes, and then Universal put out a press release saying that Anthony Perkins is going to reprise Norman Bates in Psycho 2. And the world went fucking crazy.
Oh, great, yeah.
I mean, the reaction was from the news media, and all of a sudden Universal said, "Uh-oh, we got something here." And all of a sudden we went from being a low-budget film that they were going to dump to a film that gave us a theatrical release.
Right.
And not only that, I think that Psycho 2 was the #1 film in the summer of 1982, or maybe it was 83, I can't remember.
Well, you talked about being 10 or 12 when you first saw Psycho 1. I was 10 years old when I saw Psycho 2.
Oh, God, well, okay, that tells you something.
And it blew me away. I loved it. And even at 10 years of age, I got the story. It just hit me hard. And still today, I love it just as much. But it's interesting that you mentioned that the press went wild over Anthony Perkins' return, because you think Psycho, you think, oh, Hitchcock. But for the press to go wild on the basis of Anthony Perkins, even though Hitchcock himself was absent, that says a hell of a lot about Perkins' performance in the first movie.
Well, yes, I mean, it's a landmark role, and Tony was, to say the least, was ambivalent. Tony felt in some ways like it had ruined his career.
Yeah.
You got to remember that prior to Psycho, Tony had, they were trying to shape Tony as a young romantic lead. I mean, he'd done huge films like Shenandoah Valley at the Shenandoah, but he'd also been a star on Broadway with Look Homeward Angel as a play. And he was adored by all the girls. I think at that point, I don't think anybody knew he was gay.
Well, I watched an Orson Welles movie a few nights back.
A little bit careful about this because he has 2 children.
All right, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know how to handle that. I'm sure they know.
Well, it's not like you're telling anything that the world doesn't know now, anyway. So you know.
I know the entire story. So,
all right, okay, yeah.
I mean that's a family that's been dogged by tragedy.
Do you think that Perkins' own experience with that type of thing gave him some sort of psychological insight into the Norman Bates character?
To some degree, that was Tony. There was, as I experienced him anyway, there was something tortured about him. You know, there was unresolved emotional conflict.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know how to put that. His wife was lovely, and she was a Berenson. And they're one of the great artistic families of Europe, I believe. The grandfather was the great art collector and art dealer. And Bernard Berenson, I forget.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm thinking Bernard Herrmann. But Berenson, there's a famous family, and her sister starred in the Kubrick film, the one where he lit it all by candlelight.
Barry Lyndon.
Yes, that's right. Tony's wife's sister was that Berenson.
Right, okay.
Also, to make it, she was in one of the planes that was flowing into the World Trade Center.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know how one of the kids is a director, and I saw a short that he did, and I thought it showed a lot of talent. But I mean, you know, God, so Tony had a tortured soul, and yet at the same time, there was also something very sweet in him.
Yeah.
And he's maybe the brightest actor I ever met. I don't know, he was really smart.
Well, when you were putting together the script to bring Tony on board, did you consult with Tony at all? Did he make any specific requests about what kind of things?
Nada, nothing.
Nothing?
When we got into shooting or rehearsals, I can't remember which, we may have been shooting actually, he asked me to add that little scene, the toasted cheese sandwich scene.
And this is where he's getting hugged and mothered by Mary.
Yeah, you remember the scene.
Yeah, where they're up in Norman's bedroom, his childhood bedroom.
Right, and I would have called it I would have called it a grilled cheese because that's the American usage.
Right.
And Richard Franklin, who was Australian, didn't understand that. And as opposed to grilled, he wanted it to be the toasted cheese scene. And I used that because that's comfort food in America.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
What I mean, you know, it's a grilled cheese sandwich is what your mother, you know, puts together in 5 minutes when you're unhappy or hungry or need a snack or something.
Yeah. Well, that particular point about the toasted cheese sandwich, that always made sense to me because found like, you know, if you're intimate with somebody, people have a particular smell about them, and toasted cheese kind of fits a little bit with the kind of smell that you get from someone who you're close and intimate with, you know.
Okay.
Well, maybe the girls I've been with just didn't have a wash or something.
Only other shot in that film that I didn't write and that wasn't in the script is that shot of Tony in front of the mirror looking at himself.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because he's playing the piano and then it dissolves to him looking in the mirror, but the piano is still playing and he can't be playing it, which was strange.
Yeah, and that was Tony insisting on that shot. Tony himself had no sense of narrative. Tony was European art film oriented. He was about mood,
Yeah.
if that makes any. If you could, well, you can look at the one that he directed, and you can sort of see it.
Oh, Psycho 3. I haven't watched it for 20 odd years. I do want to go back to it though.
No, there's no the narrative. It doesn't have the narrative strength,
Yeah.
shall we say, of Psycho.
In fact, the only thing I can remember about Psycho 3 was him beating the guy to death with a guitar, which I thought was just hilarious and brilliant.
Talking about Psycho 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, Psycho 3. What do you mean, Jeff Fahey beat to death?
Yeah, the guy had found out that he was a psycho, and I think he tried to blackmail Norman, and so he beats him to death with his own guitar.
I don't know how you could do that, but okay.
Yeah, well, yeah. But the scene was okay, you know. It was very funny. In fact, like the shot at the end of Psycho 2 where Norman hits her over the head with the shovel, that's always struck me as a real crowd pleaser scene. It's funny, you know, and everyone I ever watched the movie with burst out laughing at that one thing, but laughed in a good way, you know. And I think maybe Tony Perkins might have tried to achieve the same thing with the guitar beating in Psycho 3.
No, not going to do it.
No.
I mean, the tag where he hits her with the shovel is so shocking and so outrageous that it forces a laugh out of the audience.
Yeah.
What happened there is I had originally written it that he poisoned his mother as she had poisoned others. And so that's what you start to hear, where she has the cup of tea and she starts to strangle on it and she's dying. And it wasn't strong enough to end the movie on. It needed a stronger moment. It needed an exclamation point. And that's why I used the shovel. And I wrote that like in the last few days. What we did is we sent the script out to everybody except Tony with the last 3 or 4 pages missing.
Uh-huh.
Because that's what Hitchcock had done with the original. He had hidden the ending.
Right.
And so we did the same thing. And I was reading it over and I got insecure about ending it because it was such a strong script. I felt that you needed you needed them to walk out of the audience, to walk out with a buzzing about how insane and twisted the ending was, the last moment. And that's how I came up with the shovel killing her on the head.
Well, it is a fantastic ending, and so many movies that have a Cluedo type structure where you're guessing back and forth who did this, who did that. So many of them have a disappointing ending that doesn't quite gel everything together. And I remember watching it with my ex-partner about maybe 6 years ago, and she hadn't seen Psycho 2 before. And she was one of these people who has a real sense of time. If you talk to her about times and dates, she had like this computerized calendar in her head. So when she watched movies, if there was any mistakes on the timeline, she would pick up on it every time. Yeah?
Yeah.
We watched Psycho 2, and it got to the end, and she said, that all made sense. She said, I didn't think they would be able to pull it all together like that, but everything made sense there. And I was like, wow, yeah, even she bought into that ending.
Well, I worked so hard at filling it in. To the best of my knowledge, everything in Psycho 2 works off of the given circumstances in Psycho 1.
Yes.
And I thought that I had every hole plugged in Psycho 2. But one of those questions you sent to me had all kinds of questions in it about missing things, and I got confused with the question, but I didn't think there were any. If you discovered illogical plot points,
no, I don't think
totally unintentional.
Right. Okay. I don't think I've discovered. That was it. The only thing that I discovered that didn't gel with the first movie, and I only actually noticed this from watching the trailer for Psycho 1. Hitchcock goes upstairs, he opens the door at the back of the house upstairs, and he looks at the camera and he says, the bathroom. But in Psycho 2, it's actually a stairwell instead of a bathroom, and the bathroom is shifted places I think that was the question I sent you, was about the other parts of the house that weren't in the original film, and whether you guys took some liberties to change the house structure for Psycho 2.
Yes.
You did.
We had to have the back staircase to explain people sneaking around in the house.
Absolutely.
I put in the looking through the eye hole, because that was in Psycho 1, but it was Tony, I think, looking into the bathroom in the motel.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And what I wanted was that amazing shot where all of a sudden somebody appears staring back at you.
That's one of my favorite jump scares of all time. It's really good.
Jump scare. So I jiggered it illogically in terms of the layout of the house. And I never thought, you're probably the first person to ever ask me about that.
Well, yeah, like I say, I only noticed the discrepancy because I did a video studying the Psycho trailer. I put that up about 4 days ago on YouTube. If you haven't watched that one, go and check it out. You might enjoy that one as well.
Send me the link and I'll look at it.
Okay.
But you were right about one of the questions. The knife through Vera Miles' mouth and out the back of her head was a nod to the then current violence in slasher movies.
Yeah.
And we felt that we had to up the violence because of what was then current in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And that I can't quite remember, but I think it's why I put the teens in there being killed. I think because of things like Friday the 13th, have sex and die have become like cliché, and all I could do was play into it. But that also gave you, I think, also the shot on the window as the hand comes up trying to get it out before he's stabbed to death.
Yeah, with the fingers going against the glass and the dust coming off, which is a great shot.
But both of those were nods to the pressure we felt from what was currently successful in the horror marketplace.
Yeah, it's good because I think you achieved that. And at the same time, it didn't bring the movie down into being this cheap piece of trash, You had a couple of good kills in there, but you didn't overdo it.
Yeah. Well, the psychiatrist getting killed, I think, by Mary, that's a play on the Detective Arbus, or Arbo, whatever his name. That's a replay of the detective being killed in Psycho.
Yeah.
What we did was what Richard did with me. This is before VHS. The VHS is just coming in and is fighting it out with the other actually better system.
Was it Betamax, was it?
Yes, Betamax.
Yeah.
I would drive 20 or 30 miles to see a movie. Once I drove something like 90 miles to see a Sergio Leone movie, because if you didn't find an art house that was playing an old movie or something you wanted to see, you could never see them. And so what Richard and I did was we had Universal pull every Hitchcock movie, starting with The Silence, and I don't remember the titles now, but there are a series of silent movies, and you can watch Hitchcock developing what I call the visual set pieces. And the piece de resistance is The Lodger.
Yeah.
And that was the height of you could see him busting out then. But that was the movie they wouldn't release.
Oh, God.
That's like around 1929, 1930. Then we went through all the sound movies. So we watched Hitchcock's entire oeuvre at a screening room at Universal. And Universal was finding the films for us because otherwise you could never find them.
Wow. Yeah, it must have took you guys about a week to sit through all those films.
Oh, easily. And what we did is we pulled out and we looked at every visual set piece or everything that Hitchcock did where he moved the action forward without dialogue. And that goes to Hitchcock's line that it's called moving pictures, not talking pictures.
Yes, yes.
Comes from his training and his coming up in the silent movie era. But you can see, young and dangerous, young and beautiful. There's one after another, where the one where with Ingrid Bergman and Tony and Cary Grant, where the uranium is kept in a bottle of wine, and the exposure on that. The one where the guy, the real killer, is a band member and he twitches, and there's a huge tracking shot that's on a crane that finally goes in on this band member, and at the very end he twitches, and you know he's the killer, not the hero.
Was that Under Capricorn, was it?
Oh, Under Capricorn was like the late 40s with Ingrid Bergman.
Oh, right, okay. I've got completely mixed up with a different film. All right.
That was a failure.
Yeah.
No, there's some film he did called Young and Beautiful, which was one of the first teenage romance on the run films that was ever done, and Hitchcock directed it. Had this English teenage star that he adored, and I forget her name, Beeman or something like that.
Well, just offhand, one of the things I really loved about Psycho 2 was the supernatural ghost implications of the story, which I thought were there anyway, which made the whole film have a sort of haunted house feel about it, which for me was a bit different to Psycho 1. I just wondered whether you could give any thoughts on that.
No, I can't.
Was it not something you intended that there would be a sort of ghostly theme? Because Norman Bates does talk about, at one point, he says his mother can't be torturing him because she's dead. And then he says the line, unless she's a ghost.
Don't remember, but I think what you're talking about is what we talked about earlier, where I was trying to justify people moving around the house.
Oh, yeah.
I had to justify why, when we thought it was Norman, it was really Mary, or it was really the mother. And I think I was trying to work out how that was physically possible if you thought about it when the movie was over.
Okay.
And so I think that certainly is why I put in that back staircase. And that may be what you're talking about. I don't know. So I don't really have an answer.
All right, that's fine. So there's one thing, I owe you a small apology as well for when I did the video on Psycho 2 last week. I mistakenly assumed that you'd played a different deputy character than the one that you actually played.
Yeah, no, it was the other deputy is a fellow called Chris Hendry.
Yeah.
Who's been my best friend since high school.
Oh, right. Because I thought he was quite sort of charismatic in the role. I was going to compliment you on a good acting performance there.
I'm the deputy at the very last scene. Oh, well, I was also the deputy when they pulled the car out of the water, but you don't see my face.
Right. Okay.
The last scene with Tony.
I wanted to ask, did you spend, aside from the scenes that you shot where you were the deputy, did you spend a lot of time on set with Richard while he was directing?
Yeah, I did, but it was I could go on and on and on. It was very unusual because I boarded it out with Richard when I was writing it. Richard was really on 100% on this movie, and he was much less so on Cloak and Dagger, which I also wrote. And I think it was because Richard's love for Hitchcock. But we also knew it was either a film that would help our careers or destroy our careers.
Yeah.
And the visuals were so important because we were echoing Hitchcock that it's really built around visual set pieces, which is what Hitchcock sort of invented. The tracking shots, the shock reveals.
Yeah.
And so every one of those was planned in. And as we did that, we storyboarded them out ourselves. And I had a cork board, a big cork board. And I put out, first I structured it, every scene by scene by scene. And Richard would be telling me when he felt that it was time to have a visual set piece in there. And so it was structured in. In other words, Richard learned the script as I wrote it. and then I never got him back with that attention again.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, I kind of got the vibe that you wrote the script, but in storyboarding it with Richard, you also you sort of took part in the direction in a way by doing the storyboarding, and that Richard took part in the writing. So it's a very, very close collaboration you're talking about there.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
I've never had it happen again.
I think that really paid off well. Yeah.
Oh, brilliantly. And then what happened is that we went on to write. I went on to write Cloak and Dagger, and his son, who was a little boy who was also named Davy, something was wrong with him, and they couldn't figure out what it was. And while I was writing Cloak and Dagger, even into his making it, the boy was finally diagnosed, and it was the first time I ever heard the word autism.
Oh.
Yeah, and so Richard never came back to me the same way he was there in Psycho 2.
Right, because I rewatched Cloak and Dagger recently because I actually really liked it when I was a kid. I must have watched it about 15 times. But watching it again, I was thinking there's something off about Richard's direction here. It's not as sophisticated as Psycho 2. And that maybe explains it.
It was a great script.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was thinking it was actually like Hitchcock meets James Bond for kids. Yeah,
that was what the attempt was, and it was the Window.
Yeah.
You know, and it was supposedly a remake of The Window, which is Cornell Woolrich's short story.
Yeah.
It was the juvenile version of Rear Window by the same writer. Anyway, you couldn't get away with The Boy Who Cried Wolf story at that point. It had been done too many times, so I invented the imaginary friend. Richard was never concentrated again.
No. Oh, what a shame. Because I really think he had the potential to be a massive director. You know, his skill on Psycho 2 is incredible. But anyway, Tom, you need to get on with your day. Can I just ask briefly, anything specific you're working on at the moment?
Yes, I have a novel called The Notch.
Okay.
That's coming out in October from Cemetery Dance. I'm working on another screenplay now. I'm also working on a novel of a sequel to Fright Night.
All right. Okay. Well, Fright Night, I mean, I love that film as well. I haven't even asked you about it in this interview, but...
we haven't got time, but I mean,
yeah.
Something's going on with Psycho 2. Because I went to a Blacklist dinner, now like 5 or 6 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago. Do you know what the Blacklist is?
I don't know what that is.
Well, look it up. It's become sort of famous in Hollywood for picking out the best unproduced scripts, and then a number of them have gotten produced. Anyway, I went to an evening of horror directors, and everybody was there. James Wan, the guy who wrote, the Australian who wrote Saw, and I sat next to Bret Easton Ellis, and Psycho 2 was voted the best horror sequel ever done.
Oh, wow. And I would agree with that. Yeah.
I was enormously proud. And some of them, like Cloak and Dagger, some of them are dependent on how much they're put into rotation on the cable channels and the streaming channels.
Yeah.
Like I feel Cloak and Dagger, which was huge in the 90s, has been forgotten because they're not running it.
Well, no, yeah, I don't hear anybody mention that film. I didn't even know that you'd written that until I started studying Psycho 2 recently.
But Psycho 2 never dies. You know, I mean, whatever's going on there, I think because it's just such a well-crafted movie and because it makes the arc of the characters emotionally makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in other words, I sound like an asshole, but I mean, it's just an excellent screenplay on every level.
It is, yeah.
So
can I just ask if you can give me a very quick answer on this one? The basic idea of having family members of a previous victim of Norman Bates try to psychologically torture him after he's released from prison, I've never come across that in a fiction film before. Where did you guys get that idea from?
I was trying to bring. I thought it was what was embedded in Psycho 1.
Right.
I mean, the irony of Psycho 2 is that Tony's the only sane one there.
Yeah, yeah.
And and he fights and fights and fights. He doesn't kill anybody until the very last scene when he kills his mother. And so they have finally succeeded in driving him mad,
Yeah.
but only in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, and you, at that point you can actually understand why he goes mad. He's surrounded by arseholes, and the world is full of lies, so he may as well go back to his comfortable insanity.
It's tragic in a way.
It is. I think it's a beautiful film. I love it, and Goldsmith's score just beefs it all up even more. But yeah,
I mean, it's a phenomenal score. The cinematography is terrific.
Yeah.
It was the last gathering of Hitchcock's core group, and that was because of Green, Elton Green. What's his?
Hilton Green. Yeah.
Hilton Green, and Hilton was a lovely man, but Hilton had nothing to do with it creatively.
Yeah.
But Hilton had been Hitchcock's first AD, and he had been the first AD in the original Psycho.
Yep.
And the script supervisor that Hilton brought back the last of them. Hilton brought, in terms of the crew, the script supervisor had been the script supervisor on Psycho.
Yeah.
Everybody was still alive at the moment who'd worked with Hitchcock was there.
Wow, that's great continuity. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll never happen again. They're all gone, except for Vera Miles, who's got to be in her 90s now and won't talk to anybody.
No, and she was amazing in Psycho too. I found her quite scary.
Well, she's a very tough broad.
Yeah.
She told me that she would have played the Kim Novak part in
Vertigo. Yeah.
Except that she was pregnant.
Yeah.
And Hitchcock was furious at her.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've read about that. Yeah.
Oh, so so I heard stories, and got to remember, I was a kid. I was 38, 37, I don't know, and I walked around gaga. I couldn't believe it. And they were all excellent. Robert Loggia.
Yeah.
The girl, Meg Tilly?
Meg Tilly, yeah. And she wasn't even a known actress, really, at the time, was she?
Not at all. We had, who else came in? Princess Leia came in and read for it.
Oh, Carrie Fisher.
She was good,
yeah.
But she was too well known. And we were afraid if we put somebody from Star Wars in, it would swing the movie.
Yeah. I thought Meg Tilly was a perfect choice. Yeah.
I got a ton of stories like that. You got to go.
Yeah.
If you have any trouble, you have the number. Establish first a call, and I'll talk to you again. But
That's
establish
great.
a time first.
Okay, Tom, before you go, let me just say thanks for writing one of my favourite movies of all time, not just one of my favourite horrors. Real pleasure to speak to you, and a big thanks from my audience when they get to hear this as well. Okay?
Well, I thank you, too, because it's a movie that I want to make sure isn't forgotten.
Well, I'll be doing my little contribution towards that.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate your interest.
Okay, Tom. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Good luck in Liverpool.
All right. Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, folks, time for a commercial break here. For those of you who are not aware, over at my website, which is collativelearning.com, I've got a ton of videos and articles and audio files on film analysis and psychology and so on, which are available for digital download. And these are items that are mostly not available for free on YouTube or any other platform. You have to order the items one by one according to which ones you want to watch. And the items which are available to order are available on the film analysis page and here, which is the insight page. And that page, I'll just take you quickly to that. That page contains videos and articles and some audio files on psychology. There's a ton of psychology stuff there. There's stuff on video games. There's a couple of items on art, such as the H.R. Giger artwork. There's a huge study of his work on there. So say you wanted to make some orders and you were interested in the H.R. Giger one, you click View Product and you have a little read up, you check out the price, and if you like it, you say I want this, and the item jumps up in there into the corner, and you can stack items up there in the corner. Let's say you went back to my previous page and you went to the film analysis page, and say you wanted The Abyss. You click I want this, and you can see that the items are stacking up there in the corner. So let me just take you through some of the other things we got. I've got a big video on the movie AI Artificial Intelligence, which, as most of you will know, is a Kubrick and Spielberg collaboration, massively underrated film. So I've got a 147 page analysis of that film in PDF form, but it's got a whole bunch of supporting videos with it. Got lots of stuff on the Alien films, militarism in the movies of Jim Cameron, 2-hour video, stuff on The Exorcist, a 2-hour video on Eyes Wide Shut called The Cult of Eyes Wide Shut, and in that one I explore all of the various conspiracy interpretations of Eyes Wide Shut, and I assess which ones have got merit and which haven't, and give you my final conclusions on that. Let's see, as Full Metal Jacket, tons of Kubrick stuff here, a huge study on Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, Nightmare on Elm Street, 2.5-hour analysis, Predator, 2-hour 20-minute analysis, stuff on Pulp Fiction, RoboCop, Risky Business, Saving Private Ryan, Scarface, lots of stuff on The Shining, Silence of the Lambs, Starship Troopers, tons of stuff here for you to sink your teeth into. So if you're ever bored with waiting around for me to post new content, because sometimes it takes me a few weeks between projects, then just head over to the site and place a few orders. And once you've picked the items that you want, and they've stacked up in the corner there, you click Pay, and you can select to use your credit card or PayPal. It's all secure. I've been using this selling system for many years now, and there's never been a problem with people's personal data being breached or anything like that. And if there's ever a difficulty with the order, you can contact me very easily. There's a short video explaining how to place the orders and a little bit of a write-up here about it as well. Okay, so if you're interested in that stuff, then head over to my website, which is collativelearning.com.